Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar on DE&I, the Unspeakable Series, Episode 1, Communities Seen as the Other. My name is Sophia Chan Combrink, and I'm the Executive Director of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce in Hong Kong, a nonprofit, non-governmental organization that was created in 1977. Today, we have over 1,900 members representing nearly 300 companies, so making us one of the largest Canadian business organizations outside of Canada and one of the most active international chambers in Hong Kong. We deliver 4 core services: representation and advocacy engagement, business promotion, networking and brand exposure, learning and insight, which we will do today, and learning and training, and also information and insight. For non-Canadians joining us today, it's important for you to know that we are an inclusive and diverse community. In fact, about 40% of our membership is actually non-Canadian, so everyone's welcome. Today, we are very proud to present the first of a new series titled the Unspeakable Series, bringing you conversations about diversity, equality, and inclusion in partnership with Manulife and Colliers as a supporting ally. So as you know, the importance of DE&I has gained more traction and awareness in our community and workplaces in recent years. But as Canadians, diversity, equality, and inclusion has long been part of our DNA, if I may say so. Canada recently celebrated the 40th anniversary of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. In Canada, the Charter protects the rights and freedoms that define who we are as Canadians, allowing us to express our individuality and celebrate our differences. For example, Section 15 of the Charter makes it very clear that every individual in Canada, regardless of race, religion, nationality, or ethnic color, sex, age, or physical or even mental disability, is to be treated with the same respect, dignity, and consideration. However, no territory or country is perfect in its record of bias and discrimination. And this is why we have launched a series to bring further awareness of these topics. In the first episode, featuring a few minority groups in Hong Kong, we will share the challenges faced by each of these groups and their respective systems of support from different sectors of the society. I want to thank you for attending today's session. Personally, I think businesses can and should lead the way in modeling leadership behavior and HR practices that take diversity, equality, and inclusion more into consideration. I want to thank our speakers today who have amazing stories and remarkable statistics to share. They will be moderated by an equally amazing and knowledgeable person, Sudesh, head of DE&I in Asia for Manulife. During the session, if you want to submit questions or comments via the chat box, please feel free to do so. I'd also like to take this time to thank Manulife, Colliers for supporting us in this series, and also Resolve, Help, and Unison for their support with this episode. 100% of proceeds from today's event will be donated to these 3 causes. We would also like to thank our co-hosting chambers, Dutch Cham, Fin Cham, and Malaysian Cham, May Cham. So without further ado, let me hand it over to Sudesh. Thank you, and session.
Thank you, Sophia. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Sudesh. Some of you may not know me, and I'm with Manulife. I currently lead diversity, equity, and inclusion in Asia for the group. So DEI, I mean, what is diversity? What is equity? What is inclusion? Now, we have been hearing these words, these 3-letter acronyms being used and shaped in one way or other across all the different organizations. And what you realize quickly is it is becoming a word is being used, but do you actually really understand what it actually means? So before we get on to the panel, let's actually see what it actually means to some minority communities here in the region. Welcome to the first part of a 3-parter series that we are calling the Unspeakable Series. And today we're going to talk about communities seen as the other. But what does that mean, being the other? How different are we? So let's take a listen and take a watch. 3 short snippets from Resolve Foundation, Help for Domestic Helpers, and Hong Kong Unison.
Hong Kong, I think, is a place that we all love. Despite being very diverse, Hong Kong could be more inclusive.
As a whole, we have moved forward a little bit, but I think there's a lot more we can do.
How do we progress from here? Like, what does it mean to be a Hong Konger?
Why can't Hong Kong be an example for the world?
How can we create a platform to inspire potential community leaders who can create a more inclusive society?
Equality.
Fantastic.
Unity.
Essential.
Open-minded.
Amazing.
Challenging. Enlightening.
Empowering.
Empowerment.
Humbling.
Happy.
Fantastic.
I'm Mary, at 35 years old, from Iloilo, Philippines. Finished my bachelor's degree in nursing. I'm mother of 3 kids. The first job when I arrived in Hong Kong, I experienced abuse, lack of food. They treated me rudeness, but I still accept it because I go in Hong Kong to work for my family.
इंडिया से आई हूँ। इंडिया से मैं पंजाब से हूँ। 26 जुलाई को हेल्प ऑफिस से थी क्योंकि उन्होंने मुझे मेरी सैलरी नहीं दी थी 7 मंथ की और बिना संडे हॉलीडे। मुझे क्योंकि मैं हांगकांग में पहली बार आई थी तो मुझे हांगकांग के रूल कुछ नहीं पता था कि मैं क्या कर सकती हूँ। मैं आई थी 2-3 महीनों के बाद उनका जो बिहेवियर था चेंज हो गया था और 2-3 बार उन्होंने मुझे बिना वजह से मारा भी था और जो मेरे एम्प्लॉयर थे उसके जो हस्बैंड थे उसने मुझे गलत टच भी किया था जिस टाइम मुझे बहुत बुरा लगा था। मैंने डिसाइड किया कि अब मैं और बर्दाश्त नहीं करूँगी।
The message for domestic workers in Hong Kong is that please don't be afraid. You working here, you have been protected by the law in Hong Kong. My name is Betty. I joined Help for Domestic Workers for 15 years. Help for Domestic Workers is helping for the domestic worker who work in Hong Kong. For example, if they have entered to the labor case or if they have issue about the immigration department issue with their visa. We helping them to communicate as well with the employer. Help for Domestic Worker also have the webinar. This is educate the domestic worker to know your rights. We also provide it in Bahasa, also in English. We also have a case manager who speaks Philippine, Sri Lanka, Indian. So all the domestic workers here in Hong Kong we help.
Lamia, and I'm a Year 1 Juris Doctor candidate at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. Unison has been a very supportive anchor in my life. They've created a platform where I could represent my community and advocate for our rights. I've had the opportunity to participate in public hearings at the Legislative Council, attend summits, collaborate with some of the leading human rights activists here in Hong Kong to voice out inequality issues that my community faces. The highlight for me is the sense of community and the sense of belonging that Unison has created for me. It's been an unforgettable journey where you get to meet such inspirational youths who are trying their best to create a better Hong Kong. I will always be grateful to Unison for supporting my personal initiatives in hopes of using technology to help the marginalized and underrepresented people of our community. Being a part of Unison family has inspired me to work for the betterment of Hong Kong as an ethnic minority.
I'm Vivek Sabkota. I'm an entrepreneur. I've been in Hong Kong for the past 15 years and I've known Hong Kong Unison for 13 years. At a young age, me and my friends, we met Hong Kong Unison in our high school. Fermi Wong was the first person we met And then together we joined some activities like visiting the elderly or visiting kids with special needs. And then we performed some songs and some magic tricks, just shared our skills and had fun. Through these activities, I was exposed to a lot of different cultures in Hong Kong, and I met people from different walks of life. And I also realized the importance of sharing joy with others. I also realized that beyond our race and our cultures, we're all the same and we have very similar needs. Hong Kong Unison has definitely been a safe haven for me. They have supported me in many other ways, and which is why I am very grateful. They have dedicated their lives to improve the lives of, I think, minorities and other marginalized people in Hong Kong.
Thanks for showing those videos, and glad that the audio came out just in time. So these stories, whilst they appear different, if you notice, they all tell the same story. The story of underrepresentation, neglect, discrimination, harassment, and a lot of emotional challenges. So, I mean, I personally know how this can affect oneself, because I myself, with this lovely shade of brown, knew how hard it was growing up, being treated different, and which was beyond your choice. I know, because I know I'm different. And like I said, it wasn't by my choice. And when you're born into this world, you can't choose your gender, you can't choose your race, you can't tell whether you will be disabled or able, you can't choose your nationality, and you can't choose your parents. But this is when the world chooses you. So we're going to dig deep into these uncomfortable and unspeakable conversations today. And I'm truly humbled and honored to be moderating a very thought-provoking panel. And I would like to, and instead of having a scripted conversation, it is going to be a very casual chat revolving around race, ethnicities, with three inspiring leaders here in Hong Kong. And if you'd like to turn on your cameras, we're going to introduce to you, we are proud to have Phyllis Cheong, the Executive Director of Hong Kong Unison, Shaman Chalaram, Senior Director of Colliers International, and Sharifah Leong, Managing Director of Tree Honey Enterprises Limited, which is actually a leading halal food supplier and operator here in Hong Kong. So welcome to the show, all three of you. And I think Sharifah's camera is still off. We can't see you yet, Sharifah. So let's go. Okay, we do a wave. Everybody can see each other now. There you go. We're going to have this fun chat over here. And to all who are watching, please use the chat window to ask questions along the way. We're not going to have like a Q&A at the end of the programming to ask questions. So please have it at the bottom, and at any time you want to say it, just log it in, okay? So we're going to start with Phyllis, and it was a wonderful video earlier from Hong Kong Unison, Phyllis. So we all saw the video, but can you share more of the story behind Hong Kong Unison, your work and the challenges, and you know what, sometimes even the harsh realities?
Thank you, Sudesh, and thank you for Canadian Chambers and also Colliers for inviting Unison to this platform, to this forum. So Hong Kong Unison was actually founded in 2001, so it's been over 20 years that we exist in Hong Kong, and we were the first organization in Hong Kong that actually concerned about especially ethnic minority residents. Here, residents, I mean, they are not migrant domestic workers, and they are not asylum seekers or refugees. So these are non-Chinese, marginalized non-Chinese people. So we were actually the first organization to express our concern and provided support for this community. And our mission, we're committed to advance racial equality. So very, it's like for the racial equality. And when we talk about the others here, right? According to the latest census 2021, the non-Chinese people in Hong Kong, non-Chinese ethnicity, there were about 320,000 approximately 320,000 migrant domestic workers, whereas the residents, and also including asylum seekers and refugees. And I think a lot of people thought we had a lot of asylum seekers and refugees in Hong Kong, but the numbers actually hovered around 13,000, 14,000. So it's not as many as you think when it was, talked about in the news, And so with ethnic minority, quote unquote, residents, we are talking about less than 300,000. So actually there are more migrant domestic workers, non-Chinese people who are migrant domestic workers than, the residents who are settlers in Hong Kong. And so, but what Unison believes is, you've heard, some of the inequalities in the couple of videos, that we believe in empowerment and policy and practice change. And so we believe that these practice changes can actually address the challenges and disadvantages faced by the ethnic minorities of Hong Kong. For one thing, I mean, it's very good in this platform that Sudesh, you did mention about, how difficult it was to have brown skin, because you can't change your skin color, you can't change who your parents are. And we find, and with Unison's observation too, diversity and inclusion has been talked more, not just by marginalized groups. And people like Shaman and also Sudesh, you guys are from a more better socioeconomic class. Whereas, before, we always have this notion or stereotype that most brown-skinned people or most darker-skinned people in Hong Kong, they are of a very low social class, and they're typical stereotypes. For example, they are engaged in certain industries. I think a lot of people would think, and it is true that people often think ethnic minorities are engaged. They're either security guards, they work in restaurants as servers, as waitresses, or they're food deliverers, some very unskilled labor. But that's not true. And so that's why Unison wants to bring out, they are seen as these people, but they actually have potentials to become contributing members to Hong Kong.
When you mentioned that, Phyllis, suddenly it just dawned on me also that the darker your skin color is, you are at the lower rung of the socioeconomic pile. And I truly understand, and I truly agree, because back from where I come from, people who are at a very darker shade of color are often seen or associated with crime, or associated with abuse of their wives or their partners, and abusive drinking. So when you have these kind of stereotypes, and this is just from the Asian Indian population, from that background. But if you just go further up to the West, where the Black community faces the same challenges, and that's where the entire Black Lives Matter notion started also, because the color of your skin suddenly makes you feel that you're in the lower rung of society.
Right.
Thanks for that, Phyllis. And let's dig a little deeper to a fellow brown skin, Shaman. But Shaman his family has been in Hong Kong for years, and I'll let him tell his story. Shaman, can you tell us more about you, who is Shaman, the work that you do, and in and outside of work?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Sudesh. Thank you, everyone, for having us, and thank you, Kancham. And obviously, from a Colliers perspective, we're super excited to be part of this series. It's such an important conversation to have and to keep having, to be honest, as we look to sort of build bridges amongst various communities. As everyone said, my name is Shaman Chalaram. I'm a Senior Director Asia at Colliers. I help our clients advise our clients on hotel and their commercial real estate needs, both in Hong Kong and in some of the key outbound markets as well. But I also wear a separate hat as well, and I'm co-founder alongside my beautiful wife, Hersha, of Yama Foundation, which is a charity now set up in Hong Kong to provide equitable access to well-being services to a lot of Hong Kong's sort of underprivileged or more vulnerable or marginalized communities, including people with disabilities, special educational needs, those living in poverty, and also those suffering from mental health. So we just had last weekend as well, we just had our Accessible Wellbeing conference, and that was a virtual conference, sadly, because of what we're going through at the moment. But it was just amazing to see just on that, when we talk about marginalized communities, even having, families with different family members, maybe who are with disabilities, but them doing a yoga class with their siblings. It's just nice to see when we can bring communities together. But from a race perspective, really, it is definitely a challenge. And I think Phyllis said, obviously, some of us from a more privileged background, maybe, there's others from a less privileged background. And it does become difficult. I remember when I was 19, I was chased by a group of neo-Nazis when I was on holiday in Barcelona. And that was super scary. And that just hit me for the first time probably in my life, that someone is viewing me differently just for my skin color, from 200 meters away. And that was quite scary. And that was after a football match. And then if we bring it closer to home, to Hong Kong, and I think a lot of Indian people and ethnic minorities in Hong Kong face a similar thing when they're looking to rent a property, for example. If I bring it back to real estate, my industry, often, the estate agents authority in Hong Kong specifically states that, there is an anti-racial discriminatory policy, etc. But the first question you often get is, oh, are you Indian? The owner doesn't want to rent to you, or even doesn't want to sell the property. So that is still very much existing today, and those are some of the issues that we definitely do need to tackle. If I look at Colliers, for example, from a business perspective, we embrace all cultures, and we look at diversity across the board. So race is obviously one element, but we look at it across the board, and we're an equal opportunity employer, and that says a lot. And obviously, there's always more that us and any other organization can do. But I'm glad to see the way we're doing things, and hopefully other companies are too.
Thanks also for saying that, Shaman. I mean, the whole real estate conversations has been going on for a number of years now. I think it is not kind of dissipated. And with the racial discrimination ordinance, and specifically for renters, if you notice now on the buses and trams, there's actually an EOC advertisement talking about renting. And but even, does that bring change? I don't know. I mean, is it a problem with the real estate, or is it the communities themselves, the landlords themselves, where we need to educate at a different space?
Yeah, I think you're right. It's a great question, to be honest. And I think sometimes in life, we're always afraid of what we don't know. We tend to. It's just human nature, myself included sometimes. And I think, some things that we have to look at our own personal biases first. Address some of those, how am I viewing maybe other people? Sometimes I'm the other in the room, and sometimes in a room where someone else is the other in the room, right? So I think if we're able to address it from both sides, then the picture becomes a little bit clearer. And I think education is one thing. I think just embracing culture subtly and letting people know that actually we're not all that different. My son said it to me a couple of years ago. He had a crazy burn on his arm, and his skin was falling off, and underneath it was all the flesh and the bone. And he was super brave about it. But he said, "Dad, look at my flesh." He goes, "Oh, we all like this when we burn." I said, "Yeah, we're all the same." He goes, "So why is there racism in the world?" And he just sort of narrowed it down and hit the nail on the head straight away. And I was like, wow, for a young kid, you're probably well more aware of what's going on in the world than I am. But to address your point, I think from a real estate perspective, even if we look at developers, a few years ago, we looked at selling a property to a client, a very large, expensive, £200-300 million apartment, Hong Kong dollar apartment. And, when you look at it, it's an amazing apartment, but then the helper's room is absolutely tiny and probably inhumane. And obviously, Hong Kong, we do have an issue with space, but, when you're buying something that's 4,000 square feet, and then the helper's room is not larger than a shoe cupboard, there's just a little bit of thought sometimes needs to go into that. And some developers address this better than others. And some clients accept this, others refuse to accept it. So it's just, it is interesting. And I think there is a lesson there for all of us.
We will dig deeper into that particular question on domestic helpers later, and brown face a bit later on. But now I would like to bring in our third panelist. So Sharifa, like I mentioned earlier, she runs the premier halal business and food products here in Hong Kong. But again, I think the question is, what is halal? What is the concept of halal? What do you do, Sharifah? And now we are in the holy month of Ramadan, and next week is Eid, and it's just about apt that we have you on the program. So you can just share to us a little bit about you, who's Sharifah, and tell us about the concept.
Okay, thank you very much, and everyone. And we are very pleased to come back to the CanCham. And as a Canadian background and educated from the University of Western Ontario and in Ontario, actually, I'm very proud to be a Canadian that we know that Canada is one of the open-minded, and with the Charter of Rights and Freedom, we have all the understanding that is a very multicultural country that I'm proud of to say. And being a Muslim myself, I'm from third generations, and people will ask me, why are you a Muslim? And actually, my family is a third generations, and with a mix of Pakistanis, Malaysian, and my father is a Chinese. So it's a mix of cultures in our family. And this is how I noticed that. How do I tell people about Muslim is not just the dark skin from Saudi or Malaysia. Actually, halal is derived from the religion of Islam. And Islam itself, when I come back to the Quran, it binds our daily lives, the Holy Quran. And in one of the verses from chapter 49, I would say that, O mankind, we have created you from a male and female, and move into the nations of tribes, and you may know one another. So this is one of the meaning of diversity in Islam. We have male and female. And one point that people usually like to say that, so the one book, the Quran, and everyone from around the globe is one book, one direction, same verses, and same God, the Allah. When we pray, whether you're in Canada, whether you're in Karachi, whether you're in Hong Kong or Japan, you pray to one direction, the Makkah, right? So it's about one thing. It's about one God. And how we come into the halal and how do I started our business like a few years ago is just from one simple thing from another founder of the company. How come we do not have halal chicken pie in Hong Kong? So we started this. Yes, we only have 70 registered halal restaurants in Hong Kong, and we have 280 plus hotels in Hong Kong. Then we only have less than 10 halal certified kitchen. Why? Because people see that halal is just for Muslim. Halal is not just for Muslims. So we try to advocate that halal is for everyone. Halal is for everyone. You are eating some of the halal certified products. You must be doing it. In Hong Kong, a lot of people will be saying that, no, it's nothing to do with me. It's nothing to do with me. When we come to Indonesian made, there's 150,000 Indonesian made in Hong Kong, and 80% of them are Muslim. Then you know about what they eat, what they do. They pray, they have hijab in the mood. Of course, village will be noticed that a lot of some of the domestic helper, some of the employees who ask them, can you take your hijab away? I have friends, I have sisters that they will say that when they go to interview, can you take off your hijab? What is the reason of taking off the hijab? What problem that will create? We have to see their own potentials, not only something that covering their head, right? It's about the brain, it's about the heart itself. It's nothing to do with covering up with a hijab. Of course, we will say that it seems like easier said than done, but it's very easy. A lot of concept and the myth about halal is, of course, is about religious food. Halal is not just about religious food. Halal is not a religious food. You have the herbal candy. That's nothing, is a very fun, one of the famous brand, of course, right? This is the halal logo. So you have it in it. So this is nothing religious. It's just telling you that there's no pork in it because a lot of pig skin, or they use it as collagen. So even like Sudesh yourself, you do not take pork, or sometimes some of the Hindis, they don't take beef. So you have to be aware that, oh, there's no animal ingredients in this product. And how do I know? How do I get information about halal? How do I get information about where do I get halal certified? If we go back to the businesses, it's very simple. Just Google, right? So we can get back to more information later, discussions after. So this is how we started our halal business.
Thanks, Sharifah. I think that's a nice description of the concept of halal, especially in the month of Ramadan, and where Muslims around the world are fasting, and the understanding of fasting. So we just see people who are not eating. Oh, why aren't you not eating? Can I eat in front of you? Would you like to join us for lunch and just watch us eat? I've seen all this happen, and growing up in Malaysia, we kind of know that during the fasting month, we know how to be more courteous and understanding. And likewise, because being in a multicultural country like Malaysia, everybody understands each other. And during the different cultural celebrations, and there's a level of understanding, because that is how we grew up. But likewise in Hong Kong, there is a lack of understanding. There's a lack of understanding of different cultures. So hence, when you do not understand, you don't appreciate. And when you don't appreciate, you don't follow, or you don't adhere to it. And hence where you start all those discrimination or harassment or jokes even, or cultural misappropriation, which I would like to get into now as the next topic. And going to Shaman first, the concept of brown face. And we have been on the precipice of having this conversation over the past few weeks now. And it is like there's a divided path. You know, there's one who say, oh, nothing wrong with it. It is just acting. You're painting yourself and it's acting. So what's your big deal? And another is saying, it hurts me, it offends me, because you could have used me instead in the movie or in the show or in the programming. And why is it another person acting? But this is not just a Hong Kong issue, mind you. This is a global problem. The misappropriation of culture is a global problem. You have white Americans who speak in Chinese accents to portray a Chinese character. You have Chinese people who speak an American and British accent just to be appearing a West. Let's not go far. Let's look at Spider-Man. When you cast Tom Holland, who is full-on British, and he's speaking in an American accent, acting as Spider-Man. So where do you draw the line, Shaman, in terms of cultural appropriation? Does that mean that from an artistic standpoint, we can't portray ourselves anymore? Or when others portray us, we don't take it as like, wow, not too bad, they're talking about us, but I'm offended.
It's a great question. And I think, I mean, if we reverse it from a Hong Kong scenario, I think Bruce Lee faced this a lot in his film career when he started in the US. There was a lot of, movies, shows he was supposed to be the lead role for, and then the casting was given to someone else because he was Chinese. So, as I said, it works both ways depending on wherever we are in the world. There is an element of resilience, I think, that we all need to build up within ourselves. And that is not easy. And that normally just comes through personal experience. But I think often it hurts us more when we see it happen to someone else that we know. Maybe we can deal with our own situation, but then you see it, live, maybe it affects a sibling or a relative or whatever else it is. And that sort of makes it dawn home a little louder and clearer. How you approach this, I don't know. I come back to what I said on our own personal biases. And I think sometimes we've just got to ask ourselves very simple questions, maybe like, if I'm looking at someone who is the other, do I feel threatened? Do I feel pity? Am I fearful? Why? And actually, if you answer those questions, suddenly probably the answer is no, if you really give yourself the space to answer it. And then suddenly that barrier already comes down, and then you're open to having a conversation. But sometimes we don't give ourselves the space to have that, even that bit of thought. We prejudge, And you know, before we give someone a chance, that opportunity is gone. I faced it myself in the past. You know, in a previous corporate experience several years ago, I was in a meeting. I was the only brown person in the meeting. Everyone preferred to speak in Chinese, and abruptly I was just, you know, told, no, please just leave. Now, on the face of it, it's business. Yeah, let them get on. They know what they're doing best, no problem. But internally, that hurts, because you're like, well, I'm here. I can add value to the conversation, and yet I've been marginalized because of the way I look, and maybe my language skills aren't where they should be. And it's two ways. I can understand that, and you know, from my side, I have to put more effort in on that side. But sometimes that can be a difficult barrier sometimes to cross. It's not a comfortable feeling. So there isn't, unfortunately, a magic wand, I think, that serves this, but it's just awareness. From a company perspective, I just, you know, for the corporates who are listening, and for those staff within the corporates, I always say what would be good is, you know, there's so many amazing cultures in Hong Kong. We're an amazing melting pot, you know, and we have been for, you know, 100, 200 years, whatever it is, from traders, from the opium days, Persians coming in, everyone, you know, we are a melting pot. You know, even our families are melting pot. We've been here so long. What I'd say is, you know, even at the workplace, is embrace all the different cultural holidays that happen throughout the year. And that helps plant a bit of a seed, whether it's Diwali, whether it's, you know, Eid, you know, whether it's Hanukkah, and even some of the Chinese festivals as well. You know, let's celebrate more than maybe we all do, just to bring that cultural awareness. But yeah, not an easy question to answer, Sudesh. So I don't know if I gave you an answer, but more rather just a sharing, really.
You know, honestly, Shaman, there's no answer to this. If you think about it in a way, you know, where do you draw the line? So there's a question that just came out also. I'd like to ask the panelists in the sense that, how do you know when humor crosses the line and becomes racism? I don't know. So does that mean that all stand-up comedians around the world cannot talk about race anymore? So what will be their material? What do they joke about? What do they talk about? You know, you can't talk about politics because you be in prison. You can't talk about race because it's appropriation. You can't talk about gender because it's genderism. So then we shut down comedy. So it's a fine line, but where do you draw? But I think it's more like the usage. How do you use these differences? Is it from a pro or a cons angle? From a personal experience, so I've been in Hong Kong for 15 years now. I speak Cantonese, and I don't tell people I speak Cantonese because it's something personal to me. You don't need to know that I speak the language. So it was in an elevator where I was waiting in the lift, and a mom and the child came in, and the child referred to me in a very derogatory term and referring to my skin color in Cantonese, and the mom was just telling the child, it is like that. And I was just like, whoa. And I responded to both the mom and child in Cantonese, and telling them that it is not a nice thing to say. Please educate your child better. I felt bad saying that because I felt like I was taking it against them, but it just came out because the anger, it came out. But this was before I joined the DI world, and now I speak differently and say different things. But it is how it is, where we assume. But
I don't think it's just anger, Sudesh. I think when you face injustice, you have to speak up. And when you mentioned about that brown face incident, it doesn't anger just, or it doesn't arouse disgruntled and, you know, unpleasant feelings, not just among migrant domestic workers. I mean, there were some, the script itself is quite stereotyped, you know, and also they're not just stereotyping migrant domestic workers, but Filipinos in the big picture, because they talk about Filipinos, right? Not the migrant domestic workers. And this migrant domestic worker happened to be from the Philippines. And so why it triggers, you know, ethnic minorities, not just migrant domestic workers who speak out, because one thing, it reinforces stereotypes. So migrant domestic work or Filipinos are always portrayed as migrant domestic workers in a lot of the TV shows and movies, just like when ethnic minorities themselves are reminded whenever there is an ethnic minority, especially a brown-skinned person portrayed in a TV show or in movies, they're either gangsters, they're either, criminals or migrant domestic workers or people with a very low social class doing unskilled labor. So this is one thing they're really angry at. We have actually good role models that, for example, the ones that Unison was trying to empower, right? And to build capacity of them so that they're more seen as contributing members in the society. I mean, these are real people. These are not makeup. This is not fiction. This is not a show. And yet, because I would say 90% of the population here is Chinese, so they always focus on, having Chinese characters play the more successful people. And I think the second factor, or the second thing that really irritates a lot of the ethnic minorities in Hong Kong is that it reminds them of the inequities, especially the marginalized group. It reminds them of the inequities. And what the show is doing is amplifying these inequities in a negative way, rather than portraying it in a more positive way, because there could be more positive anecdotes of, say, a migrant domestic worker or on Filipinos, rather than putting in those narratives or the typical negative stereotypes in the script. And I think that's why it really irritates non-Chinese people, especially the brown-skinned population in Hong Kong.
You know what, Phyllis? You said it very clearly. It reinforces that is all you can be and that is all you can do. Mm-hmm. So when you keep portraying the perception, it reinforces that narrative. And likewise, even go back in the 80s and 90s, if you watch all those TV shows and movies from the US, the blacks will always be the villains, they will always be the loud ones, and they will always be the one to die first. In any horror movie, the black Americans will be the first to die. For whatever reason, and so it kind of reinforces that narrative. And that kind of nicely goes down to one question that is coming from Lamia. She's basically saying, it's saddening to see how sometimes language is used as an exclusionary tool. And how do you overcome this? And I'd like to bring this to Sharifa from language and words that we use, especially now being Muslim. And when people look at you, they don't see you as a Muslim. So you look Chinese. And when they ask you, you're Muslim, oh, you're Muslim. And immediately the perception comes in, of the perception of their understanding of people of the Islamic faith. So again, the choice of words also matters, and how is it portrayed. So how do you see it happening in Hong Kong, and how do you educate people differently?
Okay, actually, when we get back to the faces, yes, when I'm in the Chinese circles, sometimes actually, they do ask me, yes, I do have a Chinese face, but actually some of the features, they will see that, are you really a full Chinese? I say, actually, I'm a mix of Pakistani and Malaysian. So I'm not a full 100% Chinese. And when we try to address people about, oh, so you're a Muslim. And I would take it positively nowadays, that I would take it as a time for me to educate people about what is Islam. Because part of my job is to preaching words of Islam. And now I'm trying to preach Islam through food, halal, because food in Hong Kong is an easy way to tell people, and Hong Kong people everything is like 80% is about food. So this is a way to preach about the religion through food. But in the language wise, I would say, get back to one of the questions, is about languages. When we ask about, oh, you missed something during Ramadan. Oh, you don't eat. Or, oh, you don't eat bacon. Oh, you missed a lot of good food. Do we see this as discriminating? Do we see this as racism? Or do we see that just a joke, right? In France, when I say, oh, we don't drink alcohol. Oh, you missed a lot of good food. If in Spain, then you missed the Iberico. So how do I see it? And yes, as I say, it's a very negative comments, actually. I do have hard feelings about, I'm not missing anything because I'm a Muslim. I'm proud to be a Muslim nowadays more because I learned the things. So when we try to say diversities and inclusions in the language-wise, I feel that how do we educate organizations? How do we see people about the religion, not just Muslims, but like other cultural, like Hindi? How about the Nepalese, right? Nepalese have a very big group of populations in Hong Kong. How do we address all those? What do they need? And myself, I will see that it's about the perspective. It's about stereotyping. And how do we educate the local Hong Kong Chinese about different religion, the different is very important.
It's a good point, Sharifa. I think this is where I want to bring into the conversation of education and awareness, and what would be a takeaway that all our viewers today can just take back and do. In terms of language, I think one thing I in the role that I play, where I'm an active educator, I educate, I introduce, I let you see the other side of the coin. But at the same time, what we can do individually is observe. Nobody is perfect. Honestly, we all make mistakes. In fact, everybody on this panel, we would have been discriminatory to somebody also in the course of our day. Whilst, like, for example, Phyllis may be fighting for the right of the ethnic minorities, she may have also offended them during the way. And again, it is all about learning. So one thing that you can immediately do is look out for the body signs. Look out for the change in the face and the smile and the eyes and their body reaction when you make a statement. And if you see that subtle change, that discomfort that they have, apologize and rephrase it, or acknowledge that you said something wrong. That is the first step of learning, because the body is faster than the mouth. It will immediately show you a reaction. So that is where we can actually quickly learn. That's one thing I realized. So from an education, Shaman, so from what can corporates do, more and better in terms of bringing this down to grassroots?
So let me put a real estate hat on again from a Colliers perspective, or a wider real estate sector perspective. There's very few professionally qualified Indian sort of real estate professionals in Hong Kong on the advisory side, right? There's a lot of investors, etc., on that side, on the private equity side. But if you look on the advisory side, it's quite little low, the amounts of people who actually have their EAA license in Hong Kong. So I think one thing we can do is look at a grassroots level across Hong Kong and look at the different ethnic minorities and give them a window maybe to get educated, get licensed, give them a platform to then have a job and work within their own communities or work with other communities. And I think, that gives also a sense of empowerment as well. Because as well as we've talked about, there's different scales and different ranges of people who do need help. So I think from a corporate perspective, definitely looking at how we can sponsor some of that more at the grassroots level. I think from a younger age, from an education perspective with kids, sometimes it's the schools really need to do a bit of a better job at race. We've had youngsters in our family come home thinking they need to scrub their skin because they're being told they're dirty, and they're 2-3 years old, come back from kindergarten, and they're trying to rub the brown skin off. And it's like, why? Oh, someone told me at school I'm dirty. So it's also learning that, but then also learning how can you be strong and come back with that. So education on multiple points, but as corporates, really a real estate platform maybe for marginalized groups of ethnic minorities, and more cultural awareness days in the office.
And adding to Shaman, I think discriminatory is a learned attitude. You don't grow up being discriminatory, or so it's best to look at the world and look at Hong Kong, without your colored lenses, and without color lenses, everybody is the same. As Shaman's son said, deep down everybody is the same. We all, down to the bones, everybody has the same kind of, same color bones, same. So taking off your color lens is one thing, and the other thing is respect. As Asia's world city, it is actually the fabric of so many different ethnicities. That's the backbone of Hong Kong, and make it so vibrant, so dynamic. And so we're not asking each culture to assimilate. Assimilation is not what we're talking about. Assimilation doesn't bring respect. But whereas we need to embrace and put down our colored lenses, try and understand each other by, more communications, more interactive, being more interactive to non-Chinese people, especially those with brown skin, and just peel off that color and don't assume that we want them to assimilate. We are a multicultural society. We want them, and that's a diversity and the dynamics that's making Hong Kong so vibrant. I think this is very important, that respect for a different culture and respect for a different upbringing, different ethnicity.
Phyllis, you couldn't have said it any better. It's so wonderful. I think it's about respect and understanding, and we understand that you're not changing anybody here. You're not changing. And this goes nicely to I wouldn't even say it's a question, it's actually a comment by Carmen Lam. And it was so nicely said. Diversity and inclusion takes both sides. It takes other faith followers to try to understand people from one faith, but also needs the people of the particular minority faith to understand why people of other faith or no faith have stereotypes and do not know how to act in a more acceptable way. Absolutely. Because it's not majority versus minority. Because today you may be a minority. Today you are an ethnic minority or a minority population in Hong Kong. And tomorrow you take a flight, you go to India or Pakistan or Nepal or whatever, you suddenly become part of the majority. And likewise, the local Chinese here, today they are majority. But the moment they go to another country where they immediately become the minority, the things changes, the narrative changes. The narrative of inclusion changes depends on where you live and which country or which part of the world that you are. And likewise, it goes to religion. So I always believe that racism stems from three main areas. It comes from politics. Politics and racism goes hand in hand. Why? Because the majority controls the minority. And in politics, the larger population or the larger size of a political party are usually people from the same race or the same backgrounds. And hence, that is one. Politics around the world is quite tied to racism. Socioeconomics. Socioeconomics plays a huge responsibility in terms of how it drives racism. From in India especially, the color of your skin immediately puts you in the lower end of the rung versus the different color of the skin. Likewise around the world as well. And the third one is, unfortunately, is religion. Religion also plays a huge role in terms of how it cascades the conversation of racism. So I think no religion is a bad religion. Every religion teaches you to be good, teaches you to respect one another, teaches you to do no evil, be good. And this is why this is important. And that's what Sharifa is mentioning in terms of how food can bring people together. And that is what is happening through the halal concept. So we have a few minutes, and I'd like to just go around the table here to give like one parting word. And what is that one takeaway and one thing that you would like to see the world change? I'd like to start with Sharifa first.
Yes, when we say diversity is having a seat at the table today, inclusion is having a voice, and the belonging is having the voice to be heard. I say diversity is having a seat at the table. So you can be Halal Friday, right? So invite them. Halal is the preferred choice, right? Everyone can enjoy, and inclusion is listen to them. Like the festival is coming, so just come in and enjoy the Ramadan. Just let me know. I'm feel free to include everyone at our table, and its belonging is the voice to be heard. So make it happen. Just not just planning. It's very easy. As I say, Green Monday, Halal Friday, right? Halal Friday. Everything is available in the market. So this is what we wish our audience will be understanding. It's not just Islam is about the religion, but Islam is actually open to everyone. Thank you.
It's interesting because I'm missing the Ramadan Bazaar back in Malaysia. Oh gosh, seriously, it's like food haven. You just run and pick up whatever you want.
Yeah, you can see in London. Actually, London and even a lot of halal festival in Birmingham and London in different cities.
It's
so
wonderful.
Hopefully we could have a halal festival very soon.
Looking forward to it, Sharifa. And I think the whole concept about food brings people together. Likewise, when you sit in the table of vegans and vegetarians, are you going to eat meat in front of them? It's the same thing, right? It's a concept of, you wouldn't ask a vegetarian to come and have a burger with you, unless it is a meatless burger, but otherwise you won't. So it's the same thing going back again. Shuman, any parting words?
I think Sharifa said it actually, have a voice and just listen to other people. Just be culturally aware of your surroundings. It's a two-way street. Sometimes we're the other, sometimes others are the other. So just be mindful, treat others the way you want other people to treat you, really. Colliers, we have a YLC, a Young Leaders Committee, and we encourage them to have a voice and bring up all of these issues. And sometimes, us on the senior leadership side, we need to listen better. And I think that, it's top down, side to side, wherever you can learn from.
Wonderful. And I think this nicely ties into what Elizabeth mentioned on the chat over here, that corporates in Hong Kong need to do a lot more to actively give ethnic minority students, say university graduates, a leg up. So which means provide opportunities. It is when we look at hiring or bringing candidates in, open your diverse slate in terms of candidates coming in, have a bigger voice. The whole world was looking at male, female. All we are saying is add another element, add race, add disability. Disability is another forgotten group that we don't talk about. And immediately if you tag yourself as disabled, which means you are unable. So bring that back into the table as well. That's a nice, thanks Elizabeth for mentioning that. Phyllis, a nice parting word.
And just to add a bit on Elizabeth's comment and also Sudash's comment, I understand not a lot of corporates can hire locally educated ethnic minorities because of their language barrier. It's another huge issue that Hong Kong Unison is working on because of the education system. Many of the ethnic minority students actually cannot speak fluent Cantonese, and we are here with some multinational firms, right? But I do understand that ethnic minority graduates, university graduates, or higher education graduates still have difficulties entering as an entry job into these multinational companies because they don't write and speak fluent Cantonese. And so I think it's a good reflection for some of the corporate here and say, okay, if they can speak some Cantonese but not read and write, is that really necessary for that position? I mean, there are lots of other people who can read and write for them. And as a multinational company, I would imagine most of the daily necessary work, for example, emails and also letters going out, likely be English, right? So they're actually an asset to the company rather than a disadvantage that they don't speak and write Cantonese. But one takeaway is that an hour workshop cannot really help people who already have some unconscious bias on brown-skinned people and peel that away. It's very difficult. But let's think of respect and letting them have a voice, like Sharifa said. Inclusion is actually part of belonging, and letting them have a voice and not shut them up. For example, I've seen a lot of on social media, a lot of the comments, in the recent brown-face incident say, shut up, if you don't like this, go back to wherever your home country is. And it's like you're shutting down their voice. People have their own voice. And just as Shaman said, listen, give some respect to them. I think that's the most important thing.
It's a great way to end today's afternoon session. It's all about respect. It's about listening, respect, look at the body language, learn, embrace. Don't be shy to ask if you don't know, and make sure that the world is lovely. Honestly, the world is a beautiful place that we live in, and we only live once. And like what Elizabeth is saying, we can go on for another 3 hours, but we unfortunately cannot because Canadian Chambers will shut us down. So thank you so much for this lively conversation that we had this afternoon. It was great to hear from Sharifa, Shaman, and Phyllis on all the different nuggets. And a special thanks to Help, to Resolve, and to Hong Kong Unison for those lovely videos. In fact, this is just part one of 2 more coming. There's one going to be coming in June and one more later in the year on different topics. And we're looking forward to watching you listen to that as well. Thank you. Have a great afternoon and reach out. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Assalamu alaikum.